The name of the session today is Casually Connecting with Kids and Their Purchasing Parents. We're going to be exploring a lot of different questions, specifically how do industry players succeed when targeting kids and family, like what works, what doesn't work from a functional, a monetization, and a marketing point of view. We'll also look at what developers need to do if they want to try to earn a work-for-hire deal with a brand owner. We'll look at international markets and how nuances might be there when targeting kids and family. And finally, trends, some of the challenges and or things to look out for or opportunities in the future. So we have an extremely dynamic panel, a very large one. The dynamic panel consists of children's entertainment studios as well as publishers, developers, and top-notch researchers. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, about like a 2-minute background, starting with Rex right here.
Sure. Is this just live? Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Rex Ishibashi. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Originator Kids. We develop apps primarily for iOS, but also have played around with Google Play and Amazon and Microsoft, in fact. And we target kids between the ages of 2 and 8 and generally focus on an interesting mix of entertainment and education.
Hi, I'm Toshi Kameoka. I'm VP of Corporate Development and Partnerships at App Annie. App Annie is one of the leading sources of App Store analytics and market data. We're used by 90% of the top 100 worldwide publishers. And we provide data and statistics on Apple, iOS, Google Play, and Amazon, as well as Windows and Mac Store. And I'm actually filling in last minute for our VP of Corporate Communications, Marcos, who just had his second baby a few days ago. So at App Annie, because we always talk about the app stores and categories and data, we like to say that Marcos now has 2 children who fill 2 of the subcategories of the new iOS category, under 5
Nice.
and 6 to 9.
Cute.
I am Dean Mutovic. I do interactive licensing at Sony Pictures Entertainment. I focus on all of Sony Pictures' catalog movie, TV shows, and also new releases. The children's side specifically, we have Sony Pictures Animation. A few of our titles are Smurfs, Hotel Transylvania, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and a few other catalog titles. I focus on all platforms and only licensing. So we don't publish or develop in-house. We're just always looking for best-of-breed publishers and developers.
My name is Stephen Makhoul. I basically do the same thing for DreamWorks Animation. Our properties include Shrek, How to Train Your Dragon, Kung Fu Panda, etc. But we have a lot of film properties, TV properties, and sort of a lot of properties that you wouldn't necessarily think are DreamWorks, like Rocky and Bullwinkle and Where's Waldo. Very similar. Most of what we do is licensing. Very little in-house. Rarely we will pay development of ourselves. It tends almost to be all licensing. So.
My name is Vicki Rideout, and I am an independent researcher on children and media, kids, teens, and all different types of media, including mobile and digital, but also television and so on. And I work in the nonprofit community. So my clients are either academic organizations or children's advocacy groups or educational groups, public health groups, and so on. And I tend to do large quantitative national studies, like if you were just here for the Famigo presentation, the studies that were cited there from Common Sense Media, just sort of tracking the percentage of kids who are doing different activities on different platforms. So that's where I'm coming from.
Great. All right, let's kick things off talking about the demographic in general. Usually, Silicon Valley VCs sort of grown when you have a business that's focused around kids. And so why is this demographic hard? Like, why do VCs sort of shy away from it? Is it truly hard? Are there pitfalls, or are there tricks of the trade that you can navigate these waters? Anybody can answer. I'll buy a vowel.
Yeah, I've heard plenty of groaning from Silicon Valley VCs. It is hard. One of the challenges is certainly in our business, and we focus on original IP, even though we do the Mr. Potato Head app with Hasbro, is the duality of customers. You have to get parents to buy into the app, literally and figuratively, and you have to have children who enjoy the app. And that's a challenge. You know, parents oftentimes will say education is paramount in the app, but oftentimes purely educational apps aren't very delightful. So there's an
And
inherent
sometimes they
challenge.
think Angry Birds is educational, right?
Exactly.
Sorry
yeah,
about
no,
that.
it's-
If any
cer-
Rovio.
Well, certainly heard plenty of parents even say, Mr. Potato Head, our app is educational because of fine motor skills.
Of course.
And, you know, there's some truth to that, but truly, you know, curriculum-based education and making it delightful is a challenge. We've managed to do a good job of that ourselves, but it takes a lot of testing, both with kids and with parents.
I would also add that a lot of investors are looking at how different app publishers generally are using data to optimize ultimately revenue and as well as retention. And if you think about how a lot of other app publishers outside the kids category monetize, one is through advertising, which requires a lot of collection and analysis of data about the usage of the users. And then secondarily with kind of the increase in trends in freemium apps, optimizing towards in-app purchases. And there's a little bit of tension there in terms of that use of that data when you're looking at potentially probably not exposing children to advertising, and then relying on in-app purchases, that tension around, you know, what data can you collect, how can you use it, and you know, what are the risks there if those children are using these devices without their parents' permission or if there aren't proper gates in place. And so I think that is also a concern of investors.
Actually, Vicky, I have a question. You've done extensive research on families, and can you share a little bit more on what's on the top of minds of parents when it comes to devices and children's media? What have you seen? What have you learned in all your product research?
Right. Well, before I answer that, I was just going to say quickly, I've not dealt with VC, but I would guess that another reason that the children's market can be a little tougher is that the developmental appropriateness is so limited. You know, the stages of development occur so rapidly. So if you have a product that's educational for a 2 to 3 year old, it's not going to be applicable to a 4 to 5 year old, and same with an 8 to 9 year old. And so you're targeting such a narrow market, and kids age out of an app pretty quickly. So I think that's part of the challenge for those who want to make something truly educational. A thing that you see in a lot of educational content for kids is that kids who are too young for the educational message in the content are attracted to the entertainment part of the content. And so, for example, I mean, this is something that we've seen with television shows like even Sesame Street, where kids love the stories and the characters, but the 2-year-olds are loving it and wanting to watch it, but they're actually too young to pick up on the educational messages there. And that's something, I'm on the board of advisors for PBS Kids, and it's something that they struggle with a lot, is the aging down of the media to where the content's not appropriate. What parents are thinking. I've done a bunch of big national studies of parents over the last 2 years. And I'm finding it a little hard to say exactly what parents are thinking. And I think that we're in a really big transition point. I think that there's a chance for parents to tip one direction or the other. What I find is, in one of the last surveys I did, we asked parents, have all of these new devices, smartphones, tablets, iPod touches, et cetera, have they made parenting easier? Which I expected that they would have. And interestingly, we found parents did not think they had made parenting easier. So on that very big measure, I think there's, you know, a chance for this industry to do a better job. We found 40% of parents who said that, you know, it had at least somewhat made parenting easier versus 60% who said it hadn't. And the intensity of feeling on the two sides was pretty marked too, more strong than the 40-60 would lead you to believe. It was only 3% of parents who said they strongly felt that these devices had made their parenting job easier, and 35% who strongly felt they had not.
Interesting.
If I add to that? Yeah, we test all of our apps, and again, our focus is, unlike some of the other panelists, our focus is exclusively on mobile. So we have tested thousands of kids, and along with those thousands of kids, we also test and interview parents. What parents will say they want in an app is education. Number one answer, over 90%, education is most important. The use case for mobile apps is very different, though. The reality is when you talk about use case as opposed to intent or result, over 90% will say the use case is I want my kid to be quiet. I want my kid to be quiet in a restaurant, in the backseat of a car.
The digital pacifier.
Yes, exactly. So that's also part of the duality of inside a parent's mind only. Before you even get to whether the kid is finding the app either educational or entertaining, or hopefully both, that is a challenge. So, ultimately, if it's not serving its purpose as a entertainment device that is appeasing a child and keeping him or her quiet, it doesn't matter if it's educational or not.
So what I'm hearing is it's extremely complex in navigating both age groups that continue to change and have different needs, as well as appealing to the parents, et cetera. Some believe that it's helpful, others don't. So it is tricky. No wonder they're groaning.
I agree with that, and unfortunately, I agree with that. And I think that, you have to at least have the veneer of educational content, and parents are delighted when they see that their kids actually are learning from something. So if their kid can count, and to a degree that the parent did not know they could count, which happens, or recognize a letter, or say a word in Spanish, et cetera, they get very delighted. And I think the number one thing, though, is that besides occupying the child independently of the parent, is to make sure it's not doing anything, teaching them anything bad. As long as they know it's not making my child sassy, or it's not violent, or it's
Drugs.
not, showing parents in a bad light, like some of the content that they might see on some TV shows sometimes.
Like Breaking Bad?
No.
Okay.
I'm just thinking of some of the Cartoon Network shows that I hear about from parents in focus
Sure.
groups and that type of.
We don't have Cartoon Network on our panel, so we can say that. Excellent. So we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about COPA and some of the hurdles there. I know about 2 years ago, I think, a year and a half to 2 years ago, COPA came down and sort of cracked down on app developers and really, kind of flexed their muscles. And I think people complied, and now it seems like it's kind of some big studios, I won't really name anyone in particular, are sort of launching stuff and sort of trying to get under the radar screen of COPA. Have you seen that? What issues are still existing today with COPA, or what things should people be aware of and thinking about when addressing and or complying with COPA? Or should you not even bother? Should you realize that they're not really being that strict, and so for now, go ahead and if anything, they'll make an example of perhaps the biggest publishers, kind of like a Martha Stewart situation. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll jump in here. On COPA issues, I keep an arm's length distance at Sony. So we generally market directly to parents now. Anything that seems, remotely going towards children, we shy away from. So working with partners and on their marketing plans, I tend to find that the larger publishers are willing to, risk it a little more. Sure. And some of the, more nimble, smaller developers are a little scared. And I think that gap needs to be closed. I think we need, better guidance from the government, or at least better attorneys on all sides coming up with clear guidelines. And I should probably mention the Smurfs issue. So we were one of those. We've had some COPA issues in the past with, kids buying too many Smurf berries. And,
Sure. In-app purchases.
In-app purchases, we were the poster child for that. But, we came around, and the Smurfs Village is still doing as good as ever, and a lot of parents are playing.
So when you say you got in trouble, what happened and what did you do?
Trouble is probably the wrong word to use. Just notoriety probably came about. So, Apple, it was really more of an Apple issue, just to, make sure that kids couldn't purchase unlimited amounts of, berries at one time.
Sure. I think it really is an Apple issue and a Google issue, as they're actually refunding, I think, multi-millions of dollars back to parents for in-app purchases that weren't really technically approved. Excellent. So, see, maybe 2 years ago as well, I negotiated a deal with Sony Pictures and their Hotel Transylvania animation, and put it together with Play First Hotel Dash, and so it became Hotel Transylvania Dash. It did really well, jumped up to the top of the charts within the first 48 hours or so. So I'd really like to turn that to the panel and say, if you are a developer and trying to break through in the kids and family space, do you need a big brand in order to hit the top of the charts, or can you have original IP? What do you guys think?
Dean and I are going to say yes.
Yeah.
You need to license a big brand.
You need a license, of course you do,
Preferably
yeah.
from DreamWorks or Sony. You don't. I
Do
don't
you have
think
business cards?
you-
Because people would like to talk to you
Exactly.
afterwards.
I don't think you do need it. Obviously, it helps you if you have a game that's called Little Red Puppet and you have a game called Elmo. One is going to get a lot more downloads than the other, even if it's the exact same game. It really helps you with the acquisition. I think Vicky brought up a point about kids aren't. When we say kids, like this is the most segmented demographic of them all. Are we talking about under 18, under 13, under 10, under 8, under 5? The difference between preschool and a 15-year-old is massive. So I think for us, I think one of our dividing lines is on one side, if you have the preschool sort of stuff, you do want to adhere a little bit more to the COPA compliance sort of stuff, maybe less focus on advertising. And as a result, you tend to do less in terms of product in that space because it is harder to monetize under the current models. For us, and I'm sure Smurfs falls in the same category, we see a lot of our IP that is family friendly, but DreamWorks, we call it 4 quadrants, young, old, male, female. And kids don't stay in the boundaries of where they're supposed to go. If something is entertaining to them, they will find it. We try to create products that has something for the whole family, not just for one segment in the kids group. So if you're playing a Kung Fu Panda game, it's something that, a 40-year-old man should be able to enjoy
Sure.
as much as a 6-year-old.
So you guys
Plenty of 40-year-old men play Smurfs Village.
Yeah.
It's true. I'm not even joking.
Excellent. So what you're saying is if you do license a brand from you guys, you really, because it comes at a hefty price, right, if someone wants to do that, but also the studios really help with the marketing power, not only just the brand awareness because people know the equity of a particular, Smurfs is a big, right, title, but also with some marketing push. You help with those efforts.
We don't always, generally when somebody licenses a property, they are responsible for the development and the marketing, but what they're getting is a huge halo effect. And not all licensed IP is equal, even of ours. If I'm going to license you Shrek, it makes a difference if a movie is coming out. If a movie's coming out and we're spending $100 million to tell people that it's out there, we don't even need to spend money towards the game on our side. Just when you talk to Apple and Google, them knowing that a movie's coming out, your chances of being featured are a lot higher. I mean, it first all starts, you need a great game. If you have a crappy game with a brand on it, it's not going to do anything.
Right.
Which I think goes back to your original question. Do you need the IP? You need a great product more than anything. IP helps, though, quite
Sure.
a bit.
But you have to hit that date. It's a lot of pressure with a
Oh,
movie.
yeah.
A little different with a TV show.
But Rex, do you have anything to add to that? Because clearly Originator Kids has done a great job of coming up with original content and not paying any licensing fees to big IP owners.
Yeah, I totally agree with the point about great products. That's what we focus on. And, it is interesting sort of at a macro level that when there's the kind of device disruption that we're seeing with tablets and mobile, it's an interesting time. And I've seen it time and time again. I'm old enough to have seen it time and time again. When you have device disruption, it's an opportunity to create new IP that is associated with these new devices and a whole new use case. So, the endless apps, there's Endless Alphabet, Numbers, and Reader, have 500,000 daily active users, 5
Those are all your
million-
titles, all
Yeah.
Originator Kids titles.
5 million monthly active users, which I'd hold against almost any kid's property out there, including in television.
All organically, right?
All organically. We haven't spent a dime on marketing, no co-promotion, nothing.
But how did you get those organic downloads?
Just great products. And again, catching the attention of Apple with Endless Alphabet and them saying this is just a magic product. It was runner-up to App of the Year last year. All of our other products have been Editor's Choice. So Apple promotion certainly helps.
So you got lucky, or did you go hustle their door?
Well, no, you really can't. I mean, it's a bit of a black box, as it should be, I think. And again, what you can put in the slot, if you will, at Infinity Loop is a great product,
Sure.
and see if there's response, and calling attention when you can. But once you get the reputation for building great products, then they start asking for more, which is a nice.
And you've also done, like, so if, let's say if you didn't get Apple or Google love, as we like to say, you actually did some deals with schools, or kind of hustled a little bit at
Yeah.
schools as well to create awareness?
Well, we didn't hustle schools. I mean, it was, the bureaucracy of the Department of Ed in this country is pretty uninspiring, I guess, is probably the best way to put it, and is very, it's just hard to penetrate. So, in our case, what happened was releasing these apps that, again, have this interesting balance of entertainment and education. Teachers were starting to recognize and understand that some of these kids who were playing our apps
Sure.
were the best spellers, had broader vocabulary, could count to 100 at the age of 2, whatever it might be. And so teachers started recognizing it, and so now we're getting side-doored into schools.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And rather than any kind of direct marketing or sales effort into schools, we just simply release school editions of some of our apps. We have one out already that's doing very well. The second school edition, in this case with Endless Numbers, is coming out next week.
Okay.
And again, that's targeted specifically to teachers and to school districts.
So just to be real quick, you have a SKU that you launch in the App Store, and then you actually take that and you create like a product extension, if you will, that is a special edition for schools.
Correct.
Okay.
And being a small team, we really respond to what the users out there are saying.
Yep.
So it was, it got to a point where we had thousands of requests from teachers and school districts saying, Endless Reader is a great app. It's a free-to-trial app, so it has IAPs, which school districts can't utilize the volume purchase program through Apple.
Right.
So they said, we want a paid version of this app. The app is $24.99. It's not cheap.
Right.
And it'll go up to $36.99 once all the site words are built into the app come fall. And of course, the schools get 50% off of that, so the pricing is kind of considering that as well. But they're expensive apps, and they're meant for schools, really, more than homes.
By the way, our research has shown that teachers are a pretty important source of recommendations for parents on
Totally.
good educational apps, as well as, computer games and so on. So.
No, absolutely. Good.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Look, real quick, I just want to ask, do you guys think anything besides games? What about interactive toys? So other app genres, anything hot besides games? Video apps like episodes, or interactive toys, if you will, digital toys, books, anything that you have seen kind of emerge and can recommend to look at?
I would say on our side, we've seen nothing at the level of games, and
Right.
everybody tends to go to games because that's what monetizes. I'm a firm believer that in the utility space or some of the others, somebody is going to move into one of those categories and give people what they really want, and they will establish a dominant position and a brand, and then that's when everybody will chase it in.
Sure.
But, in terms of licensing, I'm sure it's the same with you, that most of our inquiries come around games. Even though I'm actively trying to push people, bring other products. Because
Sure.
also, if you're a small developer, it's a good opportunity for you, because if you want to license a known property to help with exposure of your brand, when you go after games, you're bidding against the big guys. Who can put sizable licensing fees towards it. If you go after a category that's not that exploited, but it is a category that can be a real service to people, something that people would really want, you put a brand on that in that category, it raises recognition for your company that you could work with IP.
Sure.
People will
Get
see your
ranked.
app. It may be featured within that category. Getting featured on Apple and Google in the games category, that as a business, as a marketing strategy, is like trying to win the lottery for your retirement. It just doesn't really make sense, especially as a small developer. But you can definitely look into these other categories. Maybe
Yeah.
not so much the digital toys, because that's going to require manufacturing and something bigger. But in the digital space, there's a ton of opportunity that nobody's going after.
Great. Excellent. Oh, did you, Toshi?
So at App Annie, we do track different categories and how well they're performing in terms of downloads and revenues worldwide. And we do see that games is by far the dominant among the apps on the iOS store that are classified as kids apps. But we also do see others, entertainment being one of them, storybooks. And if you look at, for instance, Frozen by Disney, what they've done with that is start out with a game, Free Fall, which is a match 3 game like a Candy Crush, and they've extended that to a karaoke app, an entertainment app, as well as a storybook app. So they've done a really good job of extending that IP across different subcategories within the App Store.
Great, that's a good example. Also, the Outfit 7 Talking Tom and stuff for digital or interactive toys. Great, let's shift and look at game mechanics or functionality. Can you tell me a little bit about what might work well, or is there any nuances when targeting kids and family, different kind of game mechanics or functionality that should be a part of your app? Or is it just like any other game genre or any other target?
I would say on our side, it's not so much targeting the kids, but if you can make it something that kids are very savvy, and if they can understand it intuitively, your entire customer base is going to understand that. If a little kid can understand it, my dad might be able to understand it.
Sure.
Not likely. So, I mean, we come up with basic rules in creating a game. If you want a truly casual game that kids would be able to play, we almost make it where it's a very loose rule, but no more than one type of input at a time. I mean, Angry Birds succeeds because you touch your finger on the screen, you drag it, you let it go. The minute you put a second input on there, if you put a second finger on the screen, you've gone to core and you've cut your audience down.
Interesting.
Substantially. And that it's my opinion.
Yeah, sure.
You know,
Everybody else agree? It's awfully silent up here. Speak
Yeah,
up.
I think largely I agree. Touch is certainly important for young kids. This is, you know, a television you can touch, if you will, or a screen you can touch, which is new to them. And tactile learning is so important for young kids. At the same time, one of the design elements that we focus on is there may be a primary interaction element, but we build in secondary and sometimes, you know, tertiary interaction elements. So, for example, in the Endless series, there's an animation that plays at the end that you're really kind of a lean back experience for a 15 to 20 minute animation that you're enjoying, but the screen is still touchable, and the word that you're focused on or the number that you're focused on starts to emanate as confetti, for example.
So it's a game and it actually has animation built in it, like a little teeny,
Well,
like
yeah, I mean, it's just a secondary interaction component to enhance the experience, and on second play, third play, et cetera, we're seeing a lot of those secondary elements come into play where
Nice.
a kid
Okay.
still wants to play focused on touch, and even during an animation that is supposed to be, again, a lean back experience, we'll give them touch options to play with
Okay.
the app.
nice. Toshi?
And just one statistic to add on that touch point is that atypically compared to other apps, iPad makes up the majority of the revenues for the iOS kids category, about 65% in a recent month. And that's by far that mix between iPad and iPhone is much more heavily weighted to iPad for kids category apps as compared to other
Wow.
apps.
That's why Toshi's on this panel, is to add those kind of stats. Thank you. All right, so a lot of developers brag about the number of downloads they have, which of course is one of many KPIs and benchmarks that you should track. However, in my opinion, another maybe possibly even more important benchmark is monetization, and specifically not just revenues but profits. So can you share what are some good benchmarks that people should be aware of when dealing with kids-based apps, like what is a good percent for in-app purchase conversions, or like, you know, any kind of virality, or what kind of stats can you share for a healthy kids game? If you maybe give me healthy and then give me excellent, like best in class, if anybody happens to know that. Toshi, that's for you, basically. Put you on the spot there.
Unfortunately, most of what we're tracking at App Annie is at the higher level to see how well they're performing,
Sure.
but less in terms of that bottom line return on investment. So
Okay.
I
Talk to
unfortunately
us
don't
about
have
the
as
higher.
much there. But on that higher line, another interesting trend that we see with the kids category is that most, or a sizable percentage of the downloads and revenues are from paid apps and not from in-app purchases. In fact, the majority of the revenues are from apps that don't have in-app purchases.
Interesting. So do you think then developers ought to be looking a little bit more in the premium when looking at kids and trying to get a parent to purchase up front as opposed to later and having their
I
kid-
think this goes back to that issue of the COPPA compliance and data collection and what you can really do and sort of the pitfalls that if you do go with a in-app purchase model. And that's why to kind of circumvent that, I think there's a lot of parents who feel more comfortable paying up front and not having that risk or feeling that their child is being taken advantage of through monetization tricks within the app.
It's a little, I dare say, perverse from my point of view because I actually like freemium. It's kind of the best thing that's happened to studios in a while because it's marketing. And my bosses are much more excited about 60 million downloads than they are about a few, extra $100,000 in royalties when they're looking at a big movie. I think freemium is a good way to go. I mean, one of the best things about Smurfs is that you never have to spend money on the Smurfs game. And I think that games that aren't hammering kids on the head for in-app purchases work. And then hopefully you get those whales. I don't know, I don't have a range in my head of what that is, but I know that a lot of people play games for free and that just, gets a network effect going. The apps that we have done, usually in the storybook area that are paid, they do well, they're nice, but they just don't get tons of downloads. You're never gonna get that many impressions. And especially, my bosses look to me to market our movies. So it's really, it's a nice complementary product and there's a little bit of money to be made there, but it's never going to be as important as a freemium and downloads.
You may not know this, Dean, but do you have a sense of what % of your users, let's say on Smurfs, are actually, converting into buying Smurf berries?
I'm sorry, that's a Smurf secret.
That's a Smurf secret. Papa Smurf says. Go ahead, Stefan.
Another thing that's sort of, when we talk about what are parents thinking, I think
Sure.
the purchase scenario goes somewhat like this. You hand the kid the phone, the kid says, can I download this? The parent says, is it free? Kid says, yeah, okay, you can download it. And that's a lot of, there's a different type of, on one end you have people who, especially on the younger end for children, you do want to buy something that will, that doesn't have ads in it, doesn't have microtransactions, doesn't have any of this stuff, so it's kind of safe, especially, something like a brand like Sesame Street. You don't want that to have ads and microtransactions in it. But the vast majority, I think, for older kids, what determines a purchase is, from the parent's point of view, is it free? I mean, it's kind of sad to say. It's funny, one time we were putting out a game, and we had a bunch of kids on the studio that day, and we had them all in the theater, and we were telling them about the game. One kid raised their hand and said, is it free?
Right.
And we said yes, the whole theater cheered. And we were just like, wow, that must be exactly what every one of them hear, when you get that. So for the mass consumption of product, but I think there is a category that's definitely on the younger end that premium, I think a premium product for Sesame Street makes a ton of sense.
But
Smurfs,
Rex-
it may not make sense.
Rex, you have original IP, and I think you are premium. Is that right?
No.
No.
There's only one premium app that we've done
Okay.
that remains premium, and that's Endless Alphabet. We have plans to actually turn it into an IAP-driven app. The trick with IAPs for the very young space, 2 through 6s, 2 through 8s, is you can't blow the trust of a parent. And frankly, our IAPs are not consumables like Smurf berries, I think, are or were. So there's an upper end to how you can monetize, but we'll never do another premium app again. I mean, we believe in the power of free. To be clear, it's free to trial, so you can play around with the app, play with 5 words. Of course, that's not going to be long-term entertainment for
Sure.
anybody, and you can't grind your way through the games by playing those 5 words over and over and earning more words. It's simply a way to trial the app for a parent, and frankly, parents like that.
Yeah.
And they like the fact that we bundle IAPs, so we don't sell numbers or words in our apps one at a time. Back in the day, Potato Head was actually an IAP-driven app, and I'll just say it did far better as an IAP app than a premium app that it is now, just because the management of the business is a little bit easier around
Okay.
that, especially with a partner involved. But we will not do another premium app, at least in this day and age and the way consumers are behaving.
Okay. So don't charge everyone. No, I'm just kidding.
One thing, I mean,
Yeah.
you bring up some interesting points too. That one thing, the business model you pick also affects the product. If you do a freemium product, there's a good chance that that's going to be more of a service-based product. I don't know if this is necessarily true for kids, but with the premium product, it is more of a product in itself. You sell it and you're not constantly doing updates. You're not constantly doing stuff. You're selling it, in the example of a book. You sell the book. You're not adding pages to it all the time. But you are, and the parent knows when they buy this that this is exactly what they're getting. It's this product, not a service.
Okay. Great. I'm going to shift and kind of whiz through a couple more key questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience questions. But let's talk about marketing for a bit. What do you do when you try to market your game? Do you target the kid, or do you try to target the parent? And if you target the kid, do you get the kid to try to convince the parent to buy? What has worked? Have you seen other marketing channels off device work? Like, I know everybody loves Apple and Google love and Amazon love, et cetera. But what other channels have you seen, or magazines or TV stations or whatever, work as far as creating awareness for your kid or family app?
I think for us, IP is one. Without marketing, just if you have a Smurf, not even the game, you just have a Smurf product at the time that the Smurf movie is coming out, that is part of your awareness.
Right. Okay, well, most people don't have like a multi-million-dollar marketing budget. So what else, like, so maybe Rex or even Vicky, have you heard of anything, or Toshi, what other channels helps to create awareness? It's okay if we don't know, we don't.
I really don't know, but I'm going to say that I think that the PR sounds like what has worked a little bit with Rex, getting, an editor's lists and stuff like that. The other thing I would encourage people to think about is groups like Common Sense Media, which is a children's media advocacy group that actually rates apps, and they rate them for their educational potential as well as for the appropriateness of content for kids. So if you can get your apps rated and then promote the notion of that website as well, that can be a win-win.
Okay, great.
But really, parents are not, the process of selecting apps is a lot less careful than some of us might hope it would be. I mean, it's what is really well known because it comes from a hot movie product or something like that, or it's from a brand that's really well known, a PBS, a Nick, a Cartoon Network, a Disney.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
and the kid comes across it or hears about it, and the parent gives it a quick glance to make sure it's free and looks safe, and that's pretty much it.
Excellent. All right. How many people in the audience here are developers, actual developers? Yep. So a handful. So do you guys have any sense, if a developer is looking to work with kids' IP, such as DreamWorks or Sony Pictures, what kind of qualifications might they need to have? I know Nickelodeon, for example, is very strict about only hiring developers that have done very preschool and been successful in the preschool segment. Do you guys have anything that you look for? If these guys want to talk, what are the kind of things that they need to have as a developer?
Good game mechanic helps, something different, novel that fits with the property. A studio, I think there's an old quote from the 60s, no one ever got fired for hiring IBM. So it's good if you've had experience and worked with, let's say some brands at least, before you just delve right into working with a studio. Because, we do a lot of marketing, and we can help, and we can create that halo effect we're talking about, but we are not the primary marketers of the app. I mean, that's your responsibility. So you have to, you know, it helps to have some experience with working with other brands and understanding that. I can, you know, make a call to Apple and maybe they'll answer it, but that's I can definitely not guarantee you features and things like that.
Okay.
I think partially is for the individual developer, it depends on where you are. If you have some good experience, you don't have a lot of product out there, that is a case where, you know, maybe starting with smaller brands and getting some work for hire where you can, that really helps. And you sort of, you know, don't swing for the fences on the first one. You're not going to do the next Frozen app without, without some understanding of the business, especially because we are now in a service-related model. It really is about, you don't just put the product out there and it's done. We're expecting you to continue supporting it for a couple years. I mean, Smurfs has been on the market for probably 4 years now. So I think as a smaller developer, it's really about, you know, find some brands that get recognition for your developer. And also learning to work with, it's one thing when you're just working internally and you all are bouncing ideas across, and because not all IP holders are the same, some are a real pain, but if you understand whenever you pass that off for approval to make sure you're consistent with that brand, that's a skill, understanding how to work with an IP holder. And you can start with smaller IP holders and work your way up, or you start, and as I said, in a category that's not the big one.
As competitive.
Work your way up towards that, and then, you know, this space moves so quickly. We were actually talking just before this. It moves so quickly. There's a good chance in 2 years we'll be working with somebody who doesn't even have a game out today. That's not true 10 years ago.
Nice.
So,
hope.
you know, you may have some success. I know, for example, our most recent game was done, our How to Train Your Dragon game was done with Ludia. And they were an interesting case where they built on their studio on the back of a bunch of smaller, like, game show IPs. They built up to that, then they did Where's Waldo, then they did Jurassic Park.
Wow.
With Jurassic Park, they understood this service model, constantly putting more content in there. And when we looked at it for Dragons, we said, well, there's a good framework. We know these guys understand it. This was a company I didn't know of.
Sure.
3 or 4 years ago.
So Ludi is a good case study.
So
great.
it's possible, but it's really about building up your portfolio. I mean, have you worked on any games before? Well, you know, what have you? Or how big is your network? If you have 10 games out there and you know you have a network X size, that's pretty impressive. You can market into those other games as well.
Thank you. No, that's helpful. So last question, I'm going to just go down. Everyone give me your quick sense of what is, you know, what do you see, what trends do you see in the future with kids and family, or either trends, you know, positive ones or any challenges if you'd like. And I'll start with Rex and just go down, or whoever wants to start is fine. And give me a 1 minute, what do you think is any challenges or opportunities for the future or trends?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is there's just so much out there already in terms of apps.
Discovery, okay.
And so discovery is a huge challenge for any developer, whether you're known or just starting. And I think, you know, depending upon which store you look at, whether it's the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store, Amazon App Store, as examples, they have very different relationships with the consumer, you know, in terms of the device as well as the store. And so that's a challenge for a small developer like us to kind of figure out and crack the code in terms of the two platforms today anyway that matter most. But discovery is a huge issue, I think, for most developers across the board.
I'd agree with that, big time.
And I would piggyback on that as well on the app discovery side. In other spaces, so much of the discovery, if you can't get featured on the app stores, is on paid UA, user acquisition advertising. And just the difficulties in this space, not only do you know, if you're targeting towards the parents, but just kind of the data, and as advertising targeting becomes more and more advanced and data-driven around optimization, so that you can get a user acquisition cost per install that's lower than your long-term value, lifetime value of your customer.
Sure.
That the challenges of not having that kind of data, as rich data or as targeted data in this space as compared to the general populace. I think that's a challenge for app discovery.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
I wish I had really good advice. I'm just thinking about this now. First, I was going to say don't chase trends, but you know, casino games are still going strong, and I make a lot of money there, and that doesn't look like it's going away.
Sure.
So
That's good for kids and family.
And runner games still come out, and people are still building village building games. So there's something to be said for that. At the same time, there will be new opportunities, and things will change as more and more parents move to different platforms. You know, Amazon's getting bigger. It's maybe that's a place to forge good relationships and you know, start there. I've had some meetings, people talking about Oculus Rift, and you know, that's a new gaming platform, and that's kind of exciting. Things like Skylanders, when that first came out, I had, you know, no faith in that. And then Disney, you know, it basically saved Disney to do, well, not save Disney, but save Disney Interactive by doing Disney Infinity. So, you know, keep up with the trends, try to differentiate yourself, but there's always going to be new platforms and new ideas and new gameplay, and brands will help.
I think one of the transitions we're seeing is on the developer side. I think they are getting, you know, it's no longer, it still is. I mean, you can, you know, have two guys working on a project together, but you really need to wear more hats. You need more people in your group who do more than just development and coding. I think, you know, what App Annie does is huge for the industry. You need people who can look at the analytics and figure out how to market your app. I would suggest, if you can, bring in a third person who maybe knows nothing about games, but they understand data and marketing. It's where, you know, all of this is going. It's a huge piece.
Absolutely. Vicky?
Well, I guess I would say that, you know, one of the trends that or challenges that I'm concerned about is the issue of monetization that we were just talking about, but for educational content. And I think that's something that in my world, the nonprofit world, we have to figure out, because there is no incentive to create the free app that is really based in a good, solid curriculum, and that doesn't have in-app purchases, and that doesn't have advertising, and that pays a lot to educational consultants to make sure that it really is effective in teaching kids. And so I think that's the challenge for us. We have public funding for educational content on television, on PBS. Some of that is moving to digital. I'd encourage people here to think about, you know, reaching out to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting as part of their Ready to Learn program and so on. But to me, from the children's perspective, I think that's the challenge. How do we put this technology and its incredible potential to teach to work for the kids who need it the most, who are the kids who can't even pay the, you know, $1.99 or $4.99,
Right.
let alone $26.99 for a really quality educational app.
Seems like big associations and organizations would have to sponsor that in order for a developer to make any money. So that's it. Thank you. I'd like to open it up to questions. We have about 5 minutes or less. Don't fall asleep yet, guys. Questions? Oh, apparently there's one behind the pillar that I can't see.
Yeah, hi. Okay.
Yay.
So I was actually sitting behind there, and I didn't. There was a point made by either the gent from DreamWorks or Sony, which I couldn't figure out because of the pillar. They said when they launch a game around the movie, they don't necessarily promote the game because their focus is the movie. I had a gaming studio in India, and we work closely with brands across the globe, building out games, both work for hire and licensing model. And one of the pain points I've had is, why don't movie studios aggressively back gaming as a part of their overall promotion plan? Because, hey, at the end of the day, the movie is going to go out of the cinema in a few weeks, but the game is going to be on the tablet or the device for a much longer period. So, I mean, the question is open to either of you who would have a view on this, and just to get a sense of what would it take for a movie studio to back a game in a proper manner as you would back a movie as well.
Basically, how can you help support the developers that are pouring a lot of effort into their apps from a marketing point of view, besides just marketing the movie?
Yeah, and there's different types of marketing. One we're talking about is like user acquisition campaigns. As a studio, we can support. We can put the app on the website. We can put it on our Facebook pages, sort of what I lump into non-financial support. But we really look for partners because this is also, it's not only, number one, it's a movie studio and their goal is to promote the movie. We operate in a smaller group in a bigger company. So for a games company, it's important to promote the game. For a movie studio, it's important to promote the movie. That said, another thing that we are looking for is if a partner comes to the table and they don't want to really do their own user acquisition, this is a skill that, it means they don't have that skill. And that skill now is as important as development. You know, how are you going to market your game? What are you going to, do you have a network you can market into? We've worked with Rovio and Halfbrick and all those who have a massive network who don't need to do a user acquisition campaign because they just push something out into their game. But we're looking for that experience from your team as well.
So you have to bring your own finesse to some extent,
Yeah.
and they'll support from a minor point of view.
Yeah.
Sure.
And no matter how successful an app is, it just doesn't compare to the money coming in from a very successful movie. So we want to promote and we try, and but our responsibility is promoting the movie, and the movie does live on. It doesn't go away.
True. Other questions? Yeah, guy in the red shirt.
Thank you so much, panel, for a great discussion so far. I have a question about subscription models. A few years back, virtual worlds were all the rage, and they were generating a lot of money. And as far as I know, they never really transitioned to mobile or iPad, or at least they were not as successful as some other business models. Is there any future in subscription models on mobile for kids?
Toshi, have you seen that at all?
What we are tracking is payments through the App Store, so there are possibilities where we're not tracking it on App Annie because there's possibilities to do those subscriptions off App Store through the websites, and we see that outside of the kids category with, say, music streaming apps like Pandora, where those subscriptions are coming in outside the App Store, they don't have to pay the 30%. That's an interesting model, and I know games generally in Asia, that's been a popular pricing model. And part of the impetus for that might be to actually circumvent that 30% that's payable to the App Store if you can develop a model where the payments are being processed outside of
That's true.
iTunes Connect or Google Play. But we haven't seen too much within the kid space to date, but that's something interesting to keep an eye out for.
Free kills everything. It's hard to get, how are you going to pay a monthly fee if you can get it for free? And I mean, free killed the paid model, and those models are still out there, but I'm sure we all know this number, that about 95% of people never spend the money on a freemium game. And that's what you're competing with the subscription model. I think there's probably something out there that could succeed, but you really have to take into account that you are competing with free more than anything else. And parents, they want to, same thing, they want to try it. And then if they see value, games work that way too. People want to try the game, and when they feel that there's value in the game and they like it,
Right.
that's when they start spending.
Yeah, it seems like a light version
Yeah.
with an option to upgrade to subscription. But if it is subscription, it'd have to have tremendous inherent value. Because people aren't afraid to pay the money, but they just need to feel like there's value there. But when so much good content is offered for free, it's really hard to compete with that from a valuation point of view. One last question, I think we're done. This gal right here. This woman over here.
Thank you for being on the panel. Vicki, in your summary that you did with how families use media, we depend on that so much, so thank you for the research.
Who are you with?
You talked about, I'm with New Mexico State University Learning Games Lab.
Oh, great.
You talked about how parents are going to teachers often for recommendations for apps, and I think that really changes the whole model of freemium or pay per app or licensing or IP, because I hope that teachers have a different way of looking at and selecting what apps they use and what makes them educational. Do you have any insights that maybe weren't published on that, as how teachers find and evaluate apps and how teachers select what's valuable?
I'm sorry to say that I don't. And it's really more, it's not the parent going to the teacher so much as the teacher getting the message to the parent. So it's sort of coming in through that channel. The only survey, I've done one large survey with teachers, that it was really about how teachers perceive the impact of entertainment media on the academic abilities of their students, and it's not favorable. And so I think, that's in general a pretty big hurdle for app developers and promoters to get over. Because teachers are seeing really negative impacts in terms of attention span and reading style from kids texting so much and that kind of general activity. But that's with teachers of slightly older kids. And so with the younger kids, I think there is more openness to saying this technology might actually help me with literacy and so on. And I just want to stress again, this is a huge opportunity. I'm not talking about monetization, but I'm talking about contribution to society, because this technology has very unique affordances for teaching children, and we have a huge challenge and crisis in this country. The proportion of kids who can read at a proficient level at grade 4 is extremely low, and the gap between the haves and have-nots is huge. 18% of African American and 20% of Hispanic kids read at a proficient level in the 4th grade. 18% and 20%. It's phenomenal. But these are not the kids who have the resources at home to have a tablet, to have parents who are necessarily researching and purchasing the best educational app. So there's something that has to happen here to make sure that this technology is used to make the contribution that it can make to society.
I'm actually working on a startup that is trying to help with the discovery of apps, like you were saying. And so I was looking at parents. I've done a rather informal survey of that. So parents learn from other parents, word of mouth, but then also teachers was probably the number 2 driver, besides also being on Apple or Google featuring. And so that was great. So I then went and did a survey with the teachers. I'm like, well, where the heck are you guys finding out about apps? And they were saying other teachers. I'm like, well, somebody's starting this, right? And so some of the teachers are influencers. Those influencers, oddly enough, are doing what any other parent is doing, which is looking at free and seeing what's top of charts, as well as, and then downloading. So a teacher's not going to spend, if you try to look at, let's say, 20 apps to see which is the best math app, that's going to be at least $20 possibly, right? If it's premium or in-app, it's hard for them, and that's a lot of time. So a lot of them are just sort of quickly browsing through the free or what's featured on Apple and or Google, or sometimes Common Sense Media is a researcher that focuses on that. But it's still an area that I think has potential, and it's the discovery and needs to be solved. So it's haphazard, is to answer your question. Mm-hmm. I think that's it, guys. I'm sure you have other questions. Feel free. This is a great panel. Thank you so much, guys. Very, very insightful. Thank you for coming.